So Java Spark is a micro framework based on Ruby Sinatra micro framework. And a lot of people think the Sinatra micro framework is super awesome, and they're kind of right, because you may never want to do anything with this in production, but if you just want to play around with building a RESTful web service or something like that, it's ridiculously easy. I mean, it's just crazy. And I'm getting ahead of myself here. So Java Spark is a micro framework, makes building basically anything HTTP based, for example, RESTful web services, and simple web apps, pretty crazy easy. And I'm going to show you how to do some of that today. Was inspired by Ruby Sinatra. Ruby Sinatra showed up in 2007. A version 1 of Spark was written in 2011 against the last release of version 1 is against Java 7. In version 2 was rewritten completely from scratch in 2014. Only supports Java 8, and you'll see why. That's the version we're going to be playing with. Version 1 is no longer maintained, although people still use it. It's just essentially end of life. It's developed by a developer named Per Wendel, I believe how you pronounce his name. I'm not sure. He's Swedish. He's active on their forums. He's active on Twitter, and this is pretty much one of his full-time jobs is supporting this. There's also a small team of contributors. It's an open source project, of course. What's it look like? This is the Hello World stolen right off their website, and it's 100% functional. This is a RESTful web service in Spark. And what does it do? Well, if you kick it off, and I'll show you this in a minute, it's going to fire up. It's going to throw a few messages. It's going to launch Jetty. And then if we kick off curl against it, we're going to get Hello World back. And the only other thing you have to do is use Maven to bring in Spark. So getting started, you add it to your Maven POM file. You build something. That's really about it. It's really, and again, we're going to go through quite a few examples here. So. So yeah, and this is going to be a little tiny, but it is what it is. So, so here I copied. So we got hello Ojug. If I bring the POM up here,
Spark. No plugins.
this over here. There we go. So here's your dependencies. I'm also going to show something with Mustache later, so this is kind of a spoiler. But you only need this first dependency right here to do most of what I'm going to show you today. Literally, Spark Core 2.2 just came out. 2.1, so I think 2.2 came out in June or July. The previous release was like April. 2.2 gives you some templating and some other stuff, which is really nice. So if you're going to play with it, I recommend 2.2. And then I'll show you some of the templating later. So really all there is that you have to have in your POM file. I wanted to simulate a database without actually messing around with an ORM, so I'm just going to have this little hash map hanging out here the whole time. And then I modified the Hello World stuff. So, kick that off. It's running. So if we go curl, localhost, it's always 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll show you how to change that later. Boom. We just ran the Hello World demo. So pretty much what you expected, not terribly exciting. So let's.
What goal did you run?
I'm sorry.
What Maven goal did you run? Just
I just ran it. I'm just running it in Eclipse. I could run it if I ran it. It uses Spring Boot, so if I actually compiled it, you'd get a classic Spring Boot fat jar. and you could run it java-jar and whatever you want to call your jar file.
Oh, okay.
And you would end up with essentially the same thing. I'm going to run all the demos in Eclipse because it's just a lot
So
faster.
you just standard Java application.
Yeah. So let's talk about this for a second here. So we've got, so the real magic for Spark is you set up your routes. And your routes consist of, in this case, get, right? We've got our HTTP verb. We've got our actual route that's going to be used in our HTTP call. We've got our request. We've got a response. And then some code that we want to run. And here's where Java 8 magic comes in, right? So we're actually going to use a little Java 8 Lambda action here. And this is the only kind of Java 8 stuff I'm going to use because I wanted most people to be able to follow. So, and you kind of have to use this pattern now with the new version. But if you see here, like, let's say we want to play with a post. So we do a post. We're at a meetup, so why don't we build something to manage calendar or events? So silly thing. There we go. So I'm going to capture a name. And I want to capture a date. So put that here as well. And I'm going to put those in my okay, so by looking at this, if you're following along at all, you might have guessed I just created a post, HTTP post, route it's called in Java Spark parlance. So if I run this, and if I come back to curl, and I do curl-d, because I want to send data. So we can't check yet because we haven't done our getter yet, but I did get a success back. So I was able to successfully post data to my my new post route I wrote based on this event construct. So if I draw back over here, so that was all well and good. So post is great, but what is post without get? So if we just add a get in here real quick. And I'm going to show you something else which is kind of cool. So the other thing that they put in here that's pretty interesting is name parameters. And that's what that colon gives us right there on the route. So what that lets me do is that lets me get kind of crazy here with that in a second. So I can do so I'm going to go ahead and set up some variables. So if I can't find it, I'm going to return unknown event. If and here's where I want to say, because I don't want to have a route for every, how could I possibly have a route for every possible event that I want to create, right? So this name parameter lets me take care of that problem. So if I have event name, I can make that request the same. Oops. There we go. Request.params. So by putting the colon event name on here in the request.params, so I'm basically saying, hey, go into the request that I'm going to get from Jetty and look for through the params for this thing called event name, and Spark's going to do runtime substitution for me. So whatever is passed on there is automatically going to get pulled in, is going to be looked up here. And I'm not going to demonstrate it. There's a wildcarding feature that does something very similar. They call it their splat function. It's in detail pretty well in their documentation. I'm not going to cover that one specifically today. So let's just see if we can find that in here. So I'm going to look up the name after I get it. Oops, learn how to type. Oops, that needs to be contains key. So we'll just go ahead and return a string real quick that says I'm adding the character terms for readability. I don't think you'd normally be interested in doing that in a web service, but I don't know all your use cases. So otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and set a return response status. You do that literally by calling response.status and passing it your HTTP response code of choice. In this case, not found. So
You're missing an S in your response up at the top.
oh, I am, aren't I? You know, it honestly doesn't care. You can actually name these anything. So there we go. So we should now be able to do different variations on this. So let's see here. If I do a curl localhost I'll get an unknown event. If I go back up here and I do that, and I do my post, I get my response. So you can see where this kind of might come in handy for rapid prototyping. Hey, I want to see if I can whip out a proof of concept for this RESTful web service idea we have, and I want to do it over lunch. Literally that easy. So let's see here. So I'm going to do a copy paste action here. So you get so we've done get, we've done post. Supports all the verbs, the standard HTTP verbs. So put is in there as well. We will go ahead and modify the code here. We'll reuse the parameter processing capability. We'll go up here and grab the unknown event stuff here, and oops. So put, of course, is, right, so if you're a Rastafarian, or if you're super excited about your rest verbs being used properly, right? So post is create, get is of course retrieve, and put is modify. So that's just what I'm trying to simulate here real quick is a quick modification. It's going to look and behave a lot like the post. So actually I'll go ahead and grab this up here as well.
You're just missing the vet thing. And that's
I know. Copy paste. My examples are not consistent, but that's what happens when you work on this stuff until a little too late at night, right? So we should be able to, if I did that right. Now, of course, the interesting thing about curl is we have to get fancy in here and do that. So it actually will treat it as a put instead of post, because it defaults to post when you do a -D. And so let's see here. Oops, and I screwed up my command line. Oh. Let's see. There we go. Real straightforward. Real simple. So let's see here. Oops. So I have, I thought I clicked on you. So I have, so I also have an example where I have a delete. I'm going to put that aside for now because it's essentially the same thing I've done before. Very similar pattern. Again, it's all based on routes. It's fairly obvious if you're paying attention, kind of the pattern here. So one of the things that's pretty interesting that I think is really cool about this is everything ends up being a route, right? They kind of seized upon that paradigm, and so you also put in things like filters, and this is kind of done for those of you familiar with aspect-oriented programming. You have before filters and after filters, and those are going to be triggered by any call to a route. So all your before filters will get called before any route is executed. All your after filters will get called after whatever route other routes are executed. They're just as easy to set up. So if we do one real quick. They don't have a route because, why would they? They're just going to get triggered by a call to another route. Now something that's very interesting and also important to know in here is JavaSpark executes things in the order in which they are in the file. So if you have multiple before routes, the one that's first in your file is the one that's going to get called first. If you have two get routes that are named exactly the same thing, guess which one's going to get called every single time? The first one. There is some. One of the things I was playing with last night that I couldn't quite get to work, and I'm going to keep playing with that, is dynamic route management, which you theoretically have the ability through some of the other functions which are kind of poorly documented, the ability to go in there and manage, essentially add routes, remove routes dynamically from the routing table on the fly. And again, I tried that for about an hour and a half last night. Couldn't quite get it demo ready, but I think I'm close. So hopefully in the future I'll be able to show something like that. So, so one of the things you might want to do when you start playing with this is you might want to start, you might want to start getting some information from your headers, or to kind of track what's going on as you're sending stuff around. So, and the before is, a before call is a fantastic way to do that. And so, obviously you can do anything. You can do anything that's in the request. You can, there's a few other things you can go after in the system, but we can look at, for example, we can look at body, we can look at content length, we can look at content type, we can check and see if there are any cookies, we can pull headers, we can get the IP, which I already did, we can get the path info, the port along with the IP address, protocol, etc., 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 the URL. User agent's always a good one. Let's put that in there. And so if we go ahead and run that, and this works better on 2 screens. So I'll just do that, and I'll show you. There's my before being called, and the before is always executed before any other route is called. So that was invoked before the put route that I called was invoked. And so one of the things that they do is they on their website they have the world's worst authentication mechanism, where they use a before route to basically check and see if the user's in a lookup table. And it is probably the world's worst authentication, but it's also a good demo too if you want to play around with this. So the other thing you might want to do if you were going to play around with this is you can actually, this is very cool, you can actually set up a route to catch exceptions. And here I'm just using the exception class. You can actually give it a specific exception class if you want to catch one. And it's a little bit different, right? So you still have your request and your response because it's a route. Everything's a route. And so then you just handle it however you would want to handle it. So, right, I'm going to say, I had a server error. Just type response.
Status.
Oh, you're right, response.status. Can't read my own notes. And so, if my code was to throw an exception, this route would catch it and return this response to the user. So it's fairly easy to set up and fairly straightforward. So they have 2 other things here. Let me pop back to my slides real quick because I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit. So, like we showed, or like I showed some of these, right? So all the HTTP verbs are supported. If your get, your post, your put, your delete, your head, your trace, your connect, and options, those are all supported. Those are all routes. They follow the same pattern. You can use them however you want to use them. They do name parameters like I showed. They also do wildcarding. That's their splat function. So it's not, it shows up as wildcarding, but it's mostly referred to as splat. You can request. They have request access and response configuration. You can manage cookies. You can set cookies. You can examine cookies. They do have a sessions interface that's on. So you can request sessions and pull session information. AOP-like filters. You can set a redirect just by setting the redirect value in the response. It's response.redirect. You give it a new route, and it'll redirect. It'll automatically redirect through Jetty. Exception mapping, which I just showed. Runtime configuration of routes, which is a thing that kept me up till midnight last night, but it didn't quite get it working. You can, by setting your response types and stuff like that, it'll automatically do things like gzip, compression. You just set that in the response, and if you've included gzip, it'll pick it up. I first used this in playing around with Docker, and it actually runs really well in Docker. So you have to configure your Docker container to have a Java 8 runtime environment, but if you do, it's lightweight, so it runs really cleanly in Docker. So that was that was a lot of fun. So they also have this thing called results transformers. So that was another one I wanted to show. So I was going to do that real quick. So I wrote a transformer, a really simple transformer. Come on. So I wrote my 2 caps transformer. Okay, it's bad programming. It assumes it's getting a string, and it's just going to do a 2 uppercase on it, which is a horrible, horrible set of assumptions. But if I come up here to the hello, I just have to do a new so what I've done is I've basically said, hey, for this route, invoke this transformer on the output. And it converts to caps. You can do that with, they have all kinds of transformers. So if you wanted to do an XML transformer, if you want to do a JSON transformer, I mean, those are the real practical applications, right? You just want to have something out there to perform a transformation on your output, and you're going to isolate that, and you're going to have its own module. It's very easy to do. I didn't want to mess around with bringing in JSON and invoking and all this stuff, so I just did caps. But you can do anything you want. I thought if I'd had more time, my plan was to actually write one that did Pig Latin, but I was trying to do dynamic routing. And so I ran out of time to do Pig Latin. So that's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. So the other thing you can do up here, so you can do other crazy things like I don't want to use the default port of 4567. I want to use port 55555. There, I am. That's all it takes. And you have to do that before any routes are invoked. I don't want to use the default thread pool, so now I'm using 42 threads. Do you think the default is 16, and I can't remember what the timeout is. So it's got a bunch of little convenience routines like that for managing the Jetty server. You don't have to actually reach down in anything. It's just invoke the static method there.
Can that be put into a properties file, or?
Sure, yes. Or embedded in a database, right? I mean, if you wanted to do like, previously I was playing around with this, I was using ORM Lite, which I guess is very popular among the Android crowd because it's like a really tight, small ORM. So yeah, you could, and that, I was doing all kinds of stuff in the database there, and it was a lot of fun. So, so yeah, properties file, a database, yes, easily. So they have another thing here that's kind of interesting. So that's the configuration. So the other thing they have that's really interesting is response rendering. So you get a pick. Currently they support 6 templates, templating engines, I should say. And I don't know how many templating engines are out there right now. I actually kind of got curious when I looked, and I got tired of counting, so I stopped. But there's a bunch. They support they support these 6. They did a survey, and FreeMarker is the one that's being used the most in their system. I've seen a lot of Mustache use in my career, and I have no idea what Pebble or Water or Jada are, but I'm not a front-end developer, so maybe if somebody knows what those are and they want to tell me about them later, that would be cool, because I don't know. So to do templating, you have to do a couple of things here, right? So you have to oh, that's not it. You have to create your template. In this case, I went with Mustache, right? So you have to have a template. It has to be under Resources, Templates. That's very important. I just created something real simple. If it's not there, it won't find it. You'll get an error. And let's see here. Oh, and then the other thing you have to do, obviously, is you have to add, as I showed in the beginning, inadvertently, you have to add the appropriate template, Spark template engine interface to your POM file. These are all separate add-ons. They're not part of Core Spark, so you're going to have to bring it in. And there's really not that much to it. It's just, this one's called Spark Template Mustache. They're Spark Template FreeMarker, Spark Template, whatever. They just.
Is that listed on the site?
Yes, yeah, they've actually, that's like the latest section, the latest addition to their documentation is at the very bottom, and it's all the templating stuff, and it's pretty straightforward. So we had a new Mustache template engine, and oh, right. So this is, yeah, so this is going to completely change the signature of the method. So this is actually going to, so rather than expecting an object back, it's now going to expect a model and view to be returned. So I'm going to actually save a whole lot of typing by going over here. Where's that at? Grabbing this. Oops. Aha, I changed the port. I'm so funny. Must have worked. So there you go. So this is now an invoke by template, and it substituted the values into my template as it was supposed to for a Mustache template. It's just really that simple. So it's all based on just adding those extensions at the end. So back to my slide deck. So if you look on their website, they've done a survey every year. They did one in 2014. They just did one in 2015. Currently, the user base is a mixture of personal and professional projects, as you'd expect. It's primarily REST-style APIs, again, as I think you'd kind of expect. They don't actually, most people are not using the templating engines yet to serve web pages, although I imagine some people who have built some personal blogs or something. You could very easy to serve static web pages out of this. There are a few projects that do seem to be professional level, serving 10,000 plus users per day. All the information is out there at the following sites. So sparkjava.com is the main site. They're working with learnhowtoprogram.com. They've got a set of videos out there and tutorials, take you through different stuff. The sparktutorials.github.io is where to find the actual tutorials. It's not obvious from the initial website. You kind of have to look around. There's a great Spark Java Google group. And if you don't want to compile the Java docs yourself, because they don't ship currently, I found them at this spark.screenisland.com. And they're pretty handy. They're not great Java docs, but there's some stuff in there that's just easier to find in the Java docs than anywhere else. So, and that's what I have. I can show some more stuff if anyone's interested, or I can answer some questions.
Is there a lot of activity with, hey, here's my cool REST service, and I'm authenticating to use it?
I haven't seen a whole lot of that. I've seen a fair number of questions on like Stack Overflow about, hey, I'm trying to do this and it's not working quite right. There's a lot of really good examples on the Spark tutorials that cover some of that stuff. I haven't really spent a lot of time on the Google group. It's kind of where I want to do next, but I haven't had a chance to spend a ton of time on that group yet.
Have you messed around with packaging this up as a standalone app then? Or?
Yeah, it's just you just run Maven package, and you'll get your fat jar file, and you just kick it off java-jar and the name of the jar file,
Right.
and it's just going to run in Spring Boot. So it's real simple to kick off.
So the before filter that you showed, that goes before every single route?
Yes.
Is there a way to have multiple befores and attach them only to particular ones? Like maybe you want a separate before for the get and a different before for a post? Or does that even make sense?
I'm not sure that's. I wouldn't know how to do that. I didn't think about that too while I was playing around with it. I didn't have time to really, because again I spent time messing with other stuff that I couldn't get to work either. Yeah, the intention I think is to do that a different way. That doesn't feel particularly. I mean, you could have a before that looks at what came in and then chooses to not do anything, and then it would fall through the next before, and then you could choose, and at some point you could then force a redirect, right, to the method you wanted, to the route that you wanted to invoke. That's a little interesting. That'd be a little bit like a switch statement, I guess, kind of a HTTP-based switch statement. I'm not sure that's probably the ideal way to do that, but I think it would work. It would just be a little weird. So.
Does it expose any of the Spring Boot actuator or any of that stuff under the covers?
It's a good question. I haven't looked. Some of this stuff is exposed. Some stuff is exposed, and some stuff isn't. I'd have to go look in the dig around in the Java docs and see.
Do you know, does it support any of the new Servlet 3, like asynchronous servlet stack stuff?
No, I don't know. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you said that most people were serving REST services with this. I assume that you need to have some sort of JSON parser for that. Did the survey say what parser most people were using?
It looked like most people were using. No, actually, it didn't. I didn't see. The JSON seems to be what is being used throughout a lot of the demos, but I don't know if that's just the teams, their style, or if they just are trying to keep it simple for the demos or whatever. I don't know. So, but you can pretty much wire in whatever you want to wire in. It's not that hard to do. So, I don't think they have a strong commitment to one particular style, other than how they've managed or how they've laid out the different routes, right? I mean, it's a very specific paradigm they're working off of for development. So. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Slipping. Thanks, Matt.
Oh, we need to do the drawing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Rosie.
So the rules, I believe the rules have changed. It used to be for every 50 we would get a license from IntelliJ, but now it's just one per meeting.
Not enough people have been buying IntelliJ licenses because Eclipse is vast and
He's not in the drawing.
What's
So
the
we got
website?
1, 2, 3,
Random.org?
4,
Is it random?
5. We have 6 rows.
Is that what we do?
That's
Yeah.
how we do it. Yeah, I like the clips just like the rest. Well, I'm not taking it though.
Sure, it's random.org.
What's the website, Matt?
it's random.org.
It's just resolving the host.
You don't use Google DNS?
You might have to put the chip in.
It works for me. I don't get it.
You might have
It works on my machine.
Yeah.
We're not shipping.
What do you, is that
machine.
Oh, it's not a fact.
the internet likes to drop out here.
Oh, yeah, apparently it does.
Hit spacebar. There you go.
I didn't know you could do that.
Oh, never getting any more done.
My job here is done as host.
See, apparently I don't get Wi-Fi.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, just get disconnected. Because yeah, it keeps signing me out too.
Yeah, the things you
But you
find
have
in
to-
the corners of the internet.
So you have to actually get it to usually you have to pretend to force your network to shut down.
At least it's like a sane value this time. Craziness they usually make it.
Can you have it to random from the RSVPs on meeting?
That was actually a lot of fun too.
Because not everybody RSVP'd.
Well, that's kind of, this was encouraged.
Look, let me do it right now.
Okay,
We had 6 rows.
6 rows. Now, I don't pay that close of attention, so am I doing this right? I don't normally pay
Is
attention.
it 1 to 6 or 0 to?
We usually do
Well, we're zero based.
Okay.
We're not fast.
0 to 5.
No, I'm asking.
You're not Orlua?
Yeah.
4.
Okay.
Let me move, okay?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So 0 to 5 again?
Yeah.
Look at that. 1.
Congratulations, you get a license. For IntelliJ.
I thought we were 0, okay.
Yeah, zero base.
It was 0.
Counting pin.
Dun dun dun.
No. Well, 1, 2. Okay, so 0, 1, 2. Okay.
I'm cheering for my 12. Roll it again.
4.
Still that row.
Remarkably consistent.
Do it again.
Oh, we're starting over from
Yep.
scratch.
0. There you go.
We went back to
Do we need to roll again?
So we're still choosing the row?
Yeah, I want
The
to.
row was I'm sure that just
Thanks everyone for coming. If you have ideas for talks, please submit them. If you want to talk, please talk to any one of the group members up here. And we're going over to DJ's Dugout, so you're more than welcome to come. You don't have to partake in any alcoholic beverages if you don't like to. I like root beer myself. So thanks for coming, and we'll hopefully see you at the after event.
Where is DJ's?
Thanks. Right across. Oh.